Okay, it's panel time, people. So I'm going to hand the stage over to Justin Bailey, Gordon Walton, Jane Eng, and Ryan Duffin.
All right.
Hi. Hi again.
Let's see. So, I guess I'm moderating, kind of.
Semi.
Yeah. I'll just kick it off, I guess. We're talking about the state of the industry. I can't even pronounce it. That's pretty appropriate to the state of the industry. It's a broad question, I think. So I guess we'll kind of talk about just whatever we talk about with it, and then we'll have a bunch of time for Q&A. Justin is the only one who hasn't given a talk here, so maybe you could start by introducing yourself a little bit.
Sure. Let me start. It's great to be here. First time in Norway, so very happy to be invited. So had a great time. I'm the CEO of Fig. So we are best known for our crowdfunding portion of our platform. And yeah.
Cool. All right. So, state of the industry.
You should start.
I should start. Okay. Well, yeah, sure. When we were preparing for this, we were very prepared, clearly. Talking about the state of the industry, and it's pretty easy, I think, for all of us as veterans to be down about it. And maybe there's been some of those intonations in some of our talks that there's a lot of really difficult things with the industry. But one of the things that I kind of thought about before we came out here and talked about depressing stuff for 20 minutes is that, like, at what point in any of our careers was it like, oh, everything's great and sunshine and the future's bright and everything's amazing right now? And I think that I don't remember that time. We work in a creative industry, and there's always going to be some uncertainty, and it's been the same in film and books and stuff like that. And so I think that's part of it. As we talk about things that are difficult in games, to keep it in perspective. I remember in 2004 talking to a producer about crunch time, and he's like, well, everything's going to be animated in India in 5 years anyway, right? And it's 2009 came and went, and that's not what happened.
You still have a job?
Yeah, we all do. So I think that's something to keep in perspective as we talk about the state of the industry. There's always a certain amount of uncertainty when you're doing anything creative, and I think that's just the nature of the world right now. All of us could be replaced by robots in 50 years, so or less. I
guess
Jane, you want to start?
I can add.
Yeah.
So I guess I've been in the industry for, I don't know, I keep saying like more than 10 years, but it's closing to 15. I would say the state of the industry always changes, and I feel like that's the only constant, is that it's always changing. And of course, there are good sides and bad sides. That's also the other constant. I feel like recently, the thing that's been getting some attention is that, like, now there's lots of ways for fans and other people to just reach developers directly, and that's always been some conflict about, like, well, how much could developers say? Even though, like, that this day and age is really important to be engaging with your audience, and it is great to have a community, but like that comes challenges that I feel like at least 5 years ago I never really had to think about. Oh, that's also part of my job, is to be able to talk about what I do or talk about the game in almost like a personal way. But now I feel like that is almost like a little bit of an expectation that at least someone on your team have to do it. So that's a new challenge. But I think it's also an exciting time, because while there's the problematic part, that now we also get to be in control a little bit of like what message we wanted, what kind of relationship we want with our fan base, which also 5 years ago is a lot harder. So I think that's exciting, and through that I feel like there's been a lot more room for different kind of games, because now we can it's not just like what the marketing people or business people say, oh, there's a market for this. Now we know that, say, there's a market for people who like play our games, which 5 years ago it was not as obvious. So.
Does anyone else? Gordon?
Well, it's clearly the best of times and the worst of times at the same time. And that's pretty typical for the game business, right? So there's always something that's a set of huge challenges, and there's always a set of opportunities that are, go hand in hand with them. On the bad side, because we're relevant as a medium, we're in the center of the culture and political wars that are going on in all the first world nations right now. So I think that that's a challenge for us because it means we're getting involved in all kinds of stuff that has very little to do with entertaining people. And that the viciousness that's associated with that lashes out at any kind of celebrity, which we don't really think of ourselves as celebrities, by the way, but any kind of people who are doing stuff that has a public face. You can end up in the wrong place at the wrong time with that. On the best of times, you can make computer games for every computer. Think about it. The palette that we can paint with is gigantic. Any place that people are using this stuff, we can make games for them. And there's so many things that we can make games about that we couldn't make games about 15 years ago, right? The contraction of what was commercial has now switched courses, and there's many, many more things that can be commercial than couldn't before. So I think that we're in the best of times in that sense, and the worst of times in some others. And the disaggregation of distribution has meant that there's huge opportunities and new financing methods, but at the same time, those are new, which means it's hard to figure them out and hard to make them work for you. And the comfort of the studio system is gone for the most part for people, which means that you've got to find new ways to fund your games and to get moving. So it's a mixed bag, and it's always been a mixed bag. I think it's just bigger and more chaotic than it's ever been in my career.
Justin, I think either we could talk about this, your take on the state of the industry, but I think you're in a unique position to talk about, as somebody who's dealing with investment in games, the near-term future, which is maybe more interesting. Developers can talk about today, but I think you're in a better position to maybe talk about where you see it going.
Yeah, let me do that. First, I realized I botched my intro, so I'm going to go back on that. Such a tough question. What do you do? A little more context. Before FIG, I was the COO of Double Fine. I worked with Tim, and we worked together, Jane and Lee. We all worked together. And before that, I was actually worked for a couple publishers, and I led their greenlight committees where game developers would pitch their projects. So had the opportunity to see thousands of pitches.
So you've killed more games than the average person.
Oh God, if I killed.
The truth comes.
Yeah, it's funny because it actually it flows into FIG because one of the reasons I stopped on my intro is I don't want this to be an advertisement for FIG, but my thought was as I led these greenlight committees, many people were supposed to be like representing their take on sales and production, marketing, and then they're supposed to bring up those opinions from those disciplines, and what they invariably ended up doing was bringing their own consumer behavior. And we ran these on, it had to be unanimous to move forward the project. And I just thought, it's so irrelevant what I think of a game. Sure, I can tell about quality, but my one consumer take is not that important. So, with FIG and with crowdfunding, it was very interesting to me that you could get 10,000 people to say what they think. And that to me is very, very relevant. So that was not your question, though. Your question was about, so financing and where it's going in the future. If you look back to movies, so if you go 40 years back, it's pretty interesting because 40 years back in the movie industry, you had, what was happening was all these movies were being shot at a studio. There were a few big studios. They were only doing the same content over and over again. There was no kind of creative risk-taking. What then ended up happening is a few directors actually decided to branch out, to shoot on location. They had lower budgets. They decided to get multiple people to help finance their projects, which meant they had complete creative control. They owned their intellectual property. And from that, the movie franchises that have dominated Hollywood for the last 40 years have come. So, Star Wars, Steven Spielberg, The Godfather. So, back up 40 years in the game industry, and we had Trip Hawkins was putting together his first publishing contract. And Tripp was a lover of music, and so he based it off the music labels. And so that's one reason why today we're kind of in the situation we're in, because everybody started copying that contract.
Yep.
So where it's going in the future, I hope, is that we can learn from the movie industry and start getting developers, start getting your funds from multiple sources. And when you do that, stay in creative control and have your IP ownership. And I think that's where the creative risk-taking that we need to see in this industry. So a quick stat, and then I'll quit monopolizing it, but EA in 2008 released 60 games. 2016, they released 8 games. That's it. So, they used to have like tent poles, and they had smaller projects, and those smaller projects would come on to be the next tent poles. And now all you're seeing is just tent poles.
Yep, and I sat in some of those meetings where they made that decision. And they made it for good reasons for themselves, right?
Yeah.
But it's terrible for the industry and the amount of diversity in the industry. And you're right, but the thing about the film guys is they had to suddenly be marketers, and they had to be fundraisers, and they had to be businessmen on top of making films to make all that work, right? They had to have multiple skills, and they still had to be great filmmakers to make it work.
Yeah, and I don't know how developers do that, because that's part of like one thing that inspires me is can developers just make games, because that's so hard already.
Pretty hard.
Hard behind imagining. So, but like seeing the Tim Schafers and the Brian Fargos and yourself, it's like you guys do it all.
Yeah, but because we had to, not because we wanted to. I don't think any of those guys woke up one day and said, "Hey, I'd really like to get into this finance stuff," and I really want to know a lot more about marketing today. But in the end, it was a survival tactic. You had to learn it.
I would agree with that, except for Brian. I think Brian did wake up and said he wanted to do that. So.
Oh no, he just was tired of being stepped on. I understand.
Okay.
I think it's kind of, Colin mentioned it in his talk of thinking of marketing as an equal weight of it. Gordon, you mentioned in your talk, who doesn't like marketing, and maybe I raised my hand, I don't remember. But it's not that you have to like marketing, it's that you have to see the value in it. And that I 100% agree with. And I think that's maybe the thing with biz dev as well, that not every developer is going to be good at that, but that does need to be a part of your team, just like marketing does.
If nobody on your team wants to be on social media and talk about your game, then you might need to find somebody. Like, for example, I feel like I never thought of myself as someone who liked giving talks or like stream my development, but you know what? I tried it and I actually like it and I don't mind doing it. And I think that actually, just chipping in that way helps, because like I said, we're not going to hire a specific marketing person or whatnot. Like, for example, Sean, our writer, he's kind of a business guy, and it turns out he's good at it. And, so if you're a game developer, you don't have someone specific, then someone on your team got to step up. If not, you have to hire extra help, because you can't just make a good game and not think about the financing, the legal side too. That's a whole other ballpark.
Right.
Marketing, all that stuff. Yeah, you got to do it all if you don't have someone else doing it for you.
I would think the democratization of game development, it's so much easier for more people to be making games that it's like being really good at singing or playing guitar or something like that. You can be amazing and the world won't find you.
Exactly.
Like, you have to be out there.
Yeah.
And that's what marketing is great for.
Yeah.
I guess we got a little diverted there, but
future. Think more about as in building a community that you want to interact with is how I see sort of our marketing strategy, with lack of a word. We don't really talk about marketing, but more how do we have outreach to people who actually care about what we do? So that's a more less intimidating way. Just just find a group of people who care about what you do and just have a great chat about what you're doing. That actually works more than you would think, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I talk about too, I think the social marketing is very important, obviously. It's something that's like reading the tea leaves for me. It's a little tough, but the paid marketing is another side. And I had these preparing for this, and Gordon told me I probably over-prepared for this panel, but I was so excited.
You can't over-prepare. Right?
Yeah, but I was going through, and I was here's what's the current state of the industry, and what's the bad stuff, and what's the good stuff, and One of the good things, I think, is you can very effectively use Facebook and Google and some of these other tools like Outbrain to do some paid marketing and get yourself in front of a wide audience. And it is one thing, one of the bad things I was going to talk about is Steam. They've done some policy changes. One of those, which I think is pretty good, which is Steam Direct. You have to pay, so that gets rid of some of the spam that was happening on Steam. They made another policy change I think affects pretty much everybody in this room, which is you used to have these, they call them influencer packages. Anyway, you got like 5 of them, and you could get in front of a large audience that you didn't have before. And now they've changed that so it only applies to your wish list. And that was something that people haven't talked so much about. But it has impacted the sales of indie games and finding new audiences, which now makes these tools like Facebook and Google and using those paid advertising all the more important.
Yeah. And I feel like that side of things most developers don't really know about, and it's hard to find out why suddenly the marketplace has changed so much. Like, do you have any advice on like how like developer over there, like how would someone learn how that all works? Like,
a little note about that. So I at Double Fine, I helped start Double Fine Presents and was keeping on top of all the Steam policy changes and what was happening in the marketplace. And then when I went to Fig, we were mostly in the funding stage. Now we're actually helping people promote their games as the development is completing. But it was amazing. And to your point, like about taking 2 years where I wasn't focusing on it to find out how much had actually just changed in that time. And you could have an amazing game, and people might not find it. As a matter of fact, there is one person that has an amazing game. It's getting reviewed great, and they got funded on Fig. One game, by the way, was called Kingdoms and Castles. It like doubled its money for the investors, and they made like $2 million in 3 weeks. Their crowdfunding goal was 15,000. That was a huge success. Another game actually sold a few hundred copies, and it was by a very skilled game designer, very well known one as well too. And we went in trying to figure out what was happening. And so one of the differences I can talk about is and everybody probably knows this, but streamers. So Kingdoms and Castles had a huge following of streamers that started playing the game and got a bunch of awareness. But with the changes that happened, I would say, paid marketing is very important, as well as social marketing. Got to do that too. But then, in addition to that, getting a streamer, somebody who has a good following to play your game.
Well, making sure that streamers are part of your fan base is just critical. People who are not only going to play your game, but going to play your game in public. And that's going to change game design quite a bit, as people need to look at that ecosystem to make their games work. I think it's Q&A time, right?
Yeah, so I guess now we'll just open the floor up to questions. I think there's one last thing I wanted to say about that. It does seem like something that I've personally taken away from this conference is that, like a couple weeks ago, I was asking on Twitter about building a new PC, and it's like I built a bunch of PCs, but it's like it seems like every time you have to relearn it, and it seems like the marketing and the sales of games is changing so fast that every game you're going to sell, you're going to sell differently.
Right. I mean, that's one of the things like I'm excited about in the future couple years is I think you're going to see the publishing side. There's going to be some more innovation in it. The way games get distributed, I don't think in 10 years you're definitely going to see a new EA or Activision, a new publisher you haven't seen before rise through the ranks. I actually don't think Steam may or may not be the predominant platform for distribution when you get there. So, but a lot of these mid-marketing publishers, one of the things they're doing, I'm not sure how many people here are familiar with the Indie Fund. Are people familiar with the Indie Fund? Okay, cool. Yeah, awesome. So, like, they have given really good terms to developers, and because of that, these mid-market publishers have actually had to follow suit as well to be competitive. And so because of that, there's actually pretty good deals out there from these, you call them lesser known publishers, but they're working more in partnership with developers. And I like to see that change. And I think you might see publishing as a service be something that starts to come in the next 5 years.
I like publishing not being a dirty word.
Yeah.
Right? I like that.
Yeah.
What they call them.
Okay, so I just want to say that this is
Not very loud.
We don't have the mic.
Hello?
guess I'll say one more thing while we get the mic on. The good news is that, like, I don't think we can say any of us know more about the future and what's really going on than the rest of you, because we're also new to what's going on all the time. We know a little bit of the trajectory of where things have been and maybe where it's going a little bit, but honestly, it's all new to us all the time too. So don't feel like you can't learn it all, just like we have to. I'm done talking.
Because we only have 4 wireless microphones, we need people to come up to this one to ask their questions. So please form an orderly line, and then you guys just...
Don't be shy.
Come on.
We won't bite.
We'll even take a disorderly line. just to be obnoxious. Okay, well, don't be shy. Step up.
If you have a specific question for one of us, or just for the panel, maybe specify.
Yep. This is for all of you. I've asked some of you this before, and it's about VR. And what your thoughts on VR and the VR market and games in VR.
Okay.
Maybe we
I
should
have,
go.
I have
Yeah, I had that in my bad category. So
It's in the bad book. Yeah, there you go.
Unfortunately. I'd love to hear the development aspect of it, but of course there's no market because the install base just doesn't exist yet. I think something interesting might happen with VR, which is like the reverse of what people have gone out and done, which is it probably won't be driven by the home first. It'll probably be driven like by arcades and amusement parks first, and then 10 years from now might develop into the home experience.
yeah. Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry.
I've
done a little work on VR, so I know a little bit about the development side. I would say it's a very fun thing to build for, and it's a good skill to have in your pocket as a developer. But definitely make sure you get funding to do it, even if you're learning, because as Justin said, there isn't really a market for it. So I feel like people who are banking a lot on it having a return immediately, that's not realistic. But so with that in mind, it is a good skill to learn, and it forces you to do a lot of things that will be good for your general skill set. Like you have to do it at 90 frames per second. Like if you can do that, that means the rest of your games, like you know how to optimize for things, like that's a good exercise. But yeah, don't count on it paying all your bills anytime soon.
Gordon?
Yep, sharpen up your business-to-business selling skills.
Yeah.
We talked about it already, but just since not everybody was here when we did, I think like your particular project, just for the context for the room, the whole being aware of how many units are out there, and like any business, making sure that you have enough of a market. If you can get away with selling 30,000 and considering your project a success,
Yeah.
okay, sure. If you need 1 million units, well, there aren't 1 million units, so that's not going to be a success and things like that. And I think like an interesting thing with yours is going for non-photoreal. It's been talked about a lot here of that there's a whole lot of art styles that haven't been used, and I think that's a great opportunity for VR. Anything you can do to make it on the cheap is probably your best bet, because you're not going to sell a lot just by the nature of the market.
Yeah, thank you.
Then it got me for the market when it comes to like PC and Steam, which are like the main markets. Then however, then it's the console war, because me personally, as people call it, I'm a console peasant. So my question is for all of you: what do you think of the whole console war between Microsoft and Sony?
Ooh, this is recorded, right?
Yeah.
Well, on record, I love both of them.
Absolutely.
Well, I think I've mentioned this in my talk a little bit, so I don't mind repeating a little bit. From a developer point of view, like I would say, if you have to choose one to partner with, then partner with whoever is going to offer you what you need. And they both offer very different things for different people. So in that way, it's just like it's very dependent on who you are. In terms of, let's say, like developing as a platform, we use Unity, so a lot of how easy it is to develop for one or the other kind of also is constrained by that. But like they each have things they're good for and hard to develop for. So.
Anyone else want to take this one?
Well, I think console's interesting. It depends again on the type of game and how
Mm-hmm.
that type of game is working on the platforms and which part of the console ecosystem you're aiming
Yeah.
for, right? So there's a huge difference between being at the top of AAA and just being on the download only part of the platform, unless you're in a few particular categories, right? So it's like every market, you really have to study it and decide, am I aiming for the right target or not? Or am I just hearing from a small fraction of people who are adamantly telling you that that console's going to work great, but you can't find anything to back up those numbers?
Yeah, I think it just depends. I mean, from the developer side, I think it's just a matter of, just like we were talking about with competition for publishing and things like that, like, you know, partner with whoever's going to treat you better. And if
Yeah.
you're, I mean, the bigger your project, of course, the wider your install base you need to be to make your money back. But, I mean, it's not.
It's
one or the
definitely
other
not
thing.
like one is better than the other. It's
Exactly.
just they're both very different from both, I think, just like on the consumer side and even on the business side. So just
Well, you may think because you're on Steam that you're used to being somebody's bitch, but you haven't been on console yet. Is what that means.
My main platform is the PlayStation, so I just
Okay.
I just
Oh, no,
use
then you're
because of
used to
school.
it. You're all good.
I would say a lot of the streaming culture has probably come from the fact that consoles have made that way easier than it is
Yeah,
on PC,
that's
and I think that's been a boon to all of us.
Yeah,
Thank
just,
you.
just a little advice, but before you walk off, to Jane's point, before you actually decide to support a console, like get something from them if you're going exclusive with one, especially if you're doing a crowdfunding campaign, just like make it a stretch goal, do something else, but like you can get money from them if you're going exclusive first.
Thank you.
Hello. My question is primarily for you, Gordon, considering I would assume you have the most experience of the people in this room, but the rest of you may add to it however you like. And it is about development, because every single person I've talked to here today, when talking about development, they are only talking about agony and pain and depression, and
What's your point?
it's tough to hear about. Will it at some point get better? You yourself compared it to the pain of giving birth.
Well, no, I just think it's challenging, right? The more variables that are in your development equation, the more challenging it's going to be for you. And MMOs happen to have a lot more variables tossed in, to their equation. They're solving a couple of more hard computer science problems than normal games. So that's all. I just think it's you shouldn't be surprised that doing something that's entertainment based is hard and
But
challenging.
Will it at some point get better, or will it always?
My
be that
experience is no. My experience is basically as we scale, right, as we change
tough? Yeah.
to different platforms, some things get easier, but the consumers don't want the easy stuff. The consumers want the stuff that push the envelope, which means we're pushing the envelope behind the scenes, which always makes it hard again. So, and whether that
Yeah.
hard is, if we could get to a point where the platforms were stable, which won't ever happen, then we would only be pushing through design, right? And then it would be potentially easier, right? But that has never happened in our marketplace for more than 2 years in my experience.
Thank you.
I think if making games ever becomes too easy, then everybody's going to do it. I mean, we've already seen that happen with the crowding of Steam, and so if there wasn't a certain amount of anguish and torture, then it would have no value what we do, and no one would buy our games, and it would be a completely unsustainable career. That's
Wow. You could make a book title out of that.
it'd have to be a really small font.
No, shorten it up, but
I mean, I feel like in the near 15 years I've been making games, it's been hard, it's just in different ways. Like, I'm just going to make an example, but like, for example, when you're making assets, texturing used to take a long time. Now with Substance Painter, it takes like almost no time at all to do something pretty good. But then that just means that, now that I have more time, you try to do more things elsewhere, and that other thing becomes more difficult. So I guess that's a fun part of development, that being a game developer, though. You never get bored because you always get new challenges. So yeah, it gets harder, but you also have things that have gotten easier. So it just shifts.
so you didn't get the message. The message is learn to love the pain.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Thanks.
I was wondering if you have to do a lot of traveling for your work.
And
I think that depends on,
what you do.
yeah, exactly.
If it's biz dev, yeah, you get to do a lot of travel. If you do shows, if your company does shows, you might have to do a lot of travel.
I am in San Francisco, so I can almost do no travel because GDC comes to my door. But I choose to go to different conferences, and we also do the PAX shows in the US, which does mean we travel more, but it's optional. I think these days you don't have to travel if you're a game developer, but then you just have to be really good about reaching or learning in ways that don't require you to be physically somewhere. So you don't have to travel.
I think job title wise, like Jane and I aren't obligated to
Yeah.
travel.
Yeah.
Job title wise,
Yeah.
Justin and Gordon are obligated to travel.
Yeah, although you use Google Hangouts and stuff, it makes life a lot easier. I would say from an indie perspective, like if you're looking at going to those trade shows, and so you have 5 trade shows, I would look at the value add, do an ROI, find out if like maybe 3 of those trade shows you should save that money and spend it on paid advertising.
Or your community.
Yeah.
So, in fact, for our crowdfunding game, we went and talked to everyone who'd ever done a crowdfunding game up to that point and asked them, hey, has anybody ever gotten a positive ROI on backers from the show? And the answer was no, universally. And so we didn't do any shows for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Unless the publisher paid, like our partner in Europe paid for the last one we went to because we weren't going to pay for it because it wasn't positive ROI. We were spending backer money on PR, basically.
Yeah.
So,
Like we choose to go to PAX mostly because the people who are going actually really like doing it. If people didn't like doing it, we just wouldn't go. Because I don't think you necessarily make money from going to shows, like you said. It's just like, but if you enjoy it as a team building, a community facing experience, then there's like value there that's not counted by money. So but you don't have to do it.
yeah.
Thank you.
We have a lot of people lined up, so we'll try to, how are we on time?
You've got like 5-10 minutes left.
Okay,
Right.
we'll try and knock through them a
We'll
little
just be
faster.
Short answers.
Hello.
Hi.
So game journalism has gotten way more prevalent over the years, and with Twitter, everyone can be a game journalist. How does this affect you guys in your development?
I guess I can say something. It's funny because I feel like you first go through the whole, well, I don't want to say anything because I'm scared, but then I've since passed through the, well, I actually do want to be more vocal and have more opinions, and my policy is just if someone's rude to me, I just mute them or block them. But that also means that a lot of people can ask constructive questions, and then, so I feel like there is mostly, like in my opinion, as crappy as sometimes Twitter experiences can be, overall, I think it's been positive for me and like personal, just being able to interact with like other developers, other people who wants to know more about games, or even like journalists, than without something like social media around.
I agree.
Well, I
It's
think
a
it
different
depends on
skill
where your
set.
business is,
Yeah.
right? When you're in the formation stage and you need a lot of attention, you're going to try to get attention wherever you can get it. Because you need to get the word out. You need people to know who you are. You need to know what you're working on. I think as you get better known, then you need to be more discriminatory and control your messaging, which means maybe not being quite so random about it or talking to everyone and everyone about everything, right? You need to talk about the things you stay on message and make sure you're getting your message out shaped the way that you want it. And if people want to take you off track, then it's not worth talking to them.
Yeah, you can always ignore.
The first rule is never feed a troll.
Yeah.
You feed a troll, they get bigger. It's not worth it. So,
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jonas. I'm studying games programming at the university in Gjøvik. I'm realizing that as a Norwegian game developer, we have to look outside of Norway for opportunities, work. So first is where do we look, like East Coast, West Coast, and what do we bring for the big scary world? What do we bring with us in the backpack, like skills, education, experience? Yeah.
Because it kind of sucks that we're all from the U.S. on this panel.
I can maybe help. I mean, I've
Yeah.
worked. I've spent several years working in Europe. And we have a pretty international team at my studio. I think working in the U.S. is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
We have, without getting into stuff, immigration is more difficult. But there are a lot of studios within the EU, and there's no like it's actually. It's exploded in the last 10 years, and there's a ton of places that you can go work. So that's within the EU is where you should be looking. There's studios like DICE in Stockholm. Stockholm's become incredibly competitive for developers, and I mean it's almost become like the Montreal of Europe. That like how the hell do they not run out of developers with as many people work there? But they don't. So that's probably a good place. There's Amsterdam, Helsinki. There's Germany. There's tons of places.
Montreal definitely too.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a lot
Canada
easier. Yeah.
What do you need in your backpack? You need the core skills. Your core skills better be awesome. That's the ante to get into the game at all. I think you need a great attitude. I think you need to demonstrate that you worked on teams and that you're a great team player. And that gets you, that can get you an interview. And once you have an interview, you have a pretty good chance of nailing a job. So it's always, doing team projects is really important. Being able to talk through how you worked on a team, and particularly about the team failures and how they work, because they want to know that you already know that stuff before you show up, and they go, damn, we got to teach this person how to work on a team, and what's going to happen if the team's not working right? Are they going to flake out? The first job's always the hardest job because of this, because you're not, blooded. You haven't been, through the horror of it at one time, so that we know that you're going to stick with it.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't say horror. It's just normal teamwork stuff. It's hard to work on teams collaboratively to build complicated stuff. So, and not everybody is good at that the first time out.
I would also add that especially after all the people I've talked to over the last few days here, that you don't have to leave Norway. There's a lot of people who are doing cool stuff. It's harder, of course, to make your own game. Well, there's different kinds of hard, of course, but yeah, I mean, if you want to go work for a company, you might have to leave, and if you want to start your company, then you don't necessarily have to, and there are companies here as well.
Yeah, I was thinking that, there's a grant, you have grant money here that you don't have to pay back, and you can find a studio that has already received that money, and you can use that towards getting a playable prototype that you can then use these mid-market publishers to get full funding. Like, I think that's an incredible advantage. Like, you don't, in the US, like, indies don't have that opportunity.
Well, once you've done that first game, win, lose, or draw, no matter how the game turns out, you have that experience, which is key for the next job. It's really the first job that's the hardest job, because then we don't know, can you stick through and finish a game until you've done it. Is that good?
Thank you, that's really helpful. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Hi, my question is probably for all of you. You were talking about the future, and I'm curious, like, do you, the four of you, have like a goal for like where you want to be, or a new skill you want to acquire for your own skill set in the next 5 years?
I feel like maybe since I've only worked in games, that my goal is to just be able to keep making games. I guess that sounds kind of cheesy and corny, but I love making games. I want to be able to feel like I have a future in games, but I never really honestly look more than 2 years ahead. I feel like 5 years is almost like too long of a time to even plan in games. It's very much a project to project kind of thing. I always ask myself, am I okay for the next 2 years? And would I be in an okay spot to have like more options in 2 years? Like, that's kind of how I think, and I feel like maybe that's why I've been able to stick around, is because I'm okay with that like level of uncertainty. And my goal is that maybe if I could extend it to like, okay, I don't have to worry for more than 2 years, then I really feel like a winner. But yeah, that's from me.
I think it's a pretty solid sentiment. This is a good job interview question here. Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. I wouldn't dare try to predict the industry in 5 years. I'm glad that it's not part of my job to do that. Keep making cool stuff. Yeah, I don't really know. I mean,
even if you don't have a goal, the world's going to throw one at you. Is my
Exactly.
experience. Like I've essentially had the same job for like 25 years. You know, the leading game development, and believe me, I've had to learn something on every project I've ever done. I've had to do stuff I never knew I was going to have to do on every single one. You don't have to go looking for things to learn. Things are going to be thrust at you that you have to learn to be successful.
Yeah, do you mean like personal goal or professional goal?
Oh, I meant professional. Sorry, I was might have expressed it probably a little bit wrong, but I was figured you might have some like image of where you're going forward. At least maybe not 5 years, but like you said, 2 years.
Yeah, I still think there's a credible opportunity. So there, if you look at the current situation that's happening in game development, like the app store is locked. Like, you know, people, the same companies are at the very top there. AAA developers or AAA publishers aren't signing anything but like large budgets. And I think there's actually, because of those problems that exist from that situation, there's an incredible amount of opportunities in the publishing side to iterate. So that's my goal, is to, where is that? So you've got like, you know, we call it like I's, double I's, triple I's, those being indies, right? And then you've got like the B's, double B's, triple B's, and you got the A's, double A's, triple A's. And that B territory just doesn't exist anymore. And so my own professional goal is to try to bring that back.
Very cool.
My career goals were all like tech, animation stuff that would be, you know, we'll talk about a GDC next year or something. But
So keep animating is your goal, basically.
I don't know if what my job will be in 5 years could be described as animating. And that would be the hint, but we can talk about this after. It's a totally different topic that's not relevant for everybody necessarily.
Thanks.
Thank you. Last one.
Hello, general question for all of you. You mentioned and associated the game industry a bit with the film industry. And very often in countries where the game industry is emerging, you often see that it's very tightly attached to the film and TV series industry. My question is, do you think that's wise? Or is there a point in time where the game industry should try to make a name for itself when it comes to a political standpoint, because of that is very often under the film and TV series industry?
Yeah, I don't mind starting with this one just because like I've looked into this a bunch. I think it's horrible to have the movie industry and the game industry close together, and I think collaborations between the two, especially in the U.S., you've seen have ended in disaster. There was like, what was the buzzword that was going around before? Like transmedia.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've actually I got the opportunity to go to Poland recently, just a few months ago, and you know that scene there was really interesting to me because it didn't seem like movies were very big there, and like we went to this conference and like it seemed like all the cool kids were into games, and it was just really cool to see the you know artistic expression that was coming out of there, and so. The things I think we can learn from the movie side is all on the business, how they go about business. So for instance, movies do like windows, and so they'll do like, hey, you go to the theater and then it's available for rental. They just added a new window, which is, you know, 30 days before you can rent it, you can actually buy it digitally, and of course they have that. And I think that's we should learn from that in games. Definitely don't learn from the music industry. So that would be the one to stay away from.
On the development side, at least I can only speak from my personal experience. So the Bay Area has, where I'm from, we have a very strong sort of film expertise, but mostly on the VFX side. And like in the beginning, on the old days, I feel like a lot of people who like didn't make it in film had to try to be the top dog in games, and that was a really odd dynamic because it was just like, you can tell there's certain people who like kind of look down on people who make games because they just want to be really film people. But I feel like now is actually totally switched, at least in the Bay Area. Now like, I feel like there's a lot of insecurities for people who make film because they're like, they have to compete now with all the interactive stuff, which didn't used to be cool, but now it's like all the cool stuff. Like VR is the cool stuff, all the stuff, and now it's almost like they want to be more like games, at least from the development side. So it was really interesting switch, in my opinion. But I really strongly feel that they're very different medium. And I feel like if they get compared all the time, that actually does both sides in the surface because they really shine in different ways. So yeah, I would prefer it to not be attached. That's my personal.
I think that's I live in Los Angeles. I think that's actually a good, if this is the last question, I think that's a good way to wrap that. If you think like, oh, they make it sound like games are hard, I don't envy any film or VFX animator. For like, we have them come to us oftentimes because they don't want to find a new job every 2 months, and we complain about finding a new job every 2 years. So it's, I think the glamour of filmmaking, especially in today's, the way that a lot of films are doing a lot of things to stay relevant, and I think a lot of them are successful and a lot of them aren't. I mean, box office numbers are down in a lot of ways because they fall under the trap that games have come close to doing of relying too much on the tent poles and sequels and stuff like that, and we're not above it necessarily, but but I think games have innovated more, and games have also suffered for years of an inadequacy complex for film, but I think for the most part we're getting over it and we realize we're just different. I don't feel like working as a game developer in Los Angeles we're in Hollywood's shadow in any way. I don't think we have been for a long time.
Yep. You know, there used to be the thing where film was bigger than us. We're bigger than film. There used to be the thing where all the IPs came out of film and not out of games. Now IPs are coming out of games. So, and I've seen at least 3 and maybe 4 waves of Hollywood gets into games, Hollywood gets out of games, Hollywood gets into games, and they fuck it up every time. They can't help it. They can't help it, right? And again, the challenge is it's hard to do 2 businesses that have fundamentals that are different well. You can't, you know, if you come to games with a film mindset, you're going to fail. If you go to film with a game mindset, you're going to fail because the mindsets have to be different for the mediums. So I think they're just distinct mediums. I think film is on the decline in aggregate, even though there's a lot more diversity of stuff to have. In aggregate, you know, the games are more ascendant than films right now. So it's the up and coming medium, and there's plenty of lessons to learn from film though. Do not dismiss film because they've been storytelling a lot longer than we have, and they know a lot of tricks that we should be totally stealing and rubbing the serial numbers off of and using.
I'd also add that seeing Hollywood's interest in VR, which may or may not be a trend, if they are able to push it, I think they're going to find themselves a lot more dependent upon us. A lot of film tricks. VR is essentially game development with, you know, there's some different rules, but it's far closer to game development than it is filmmaking.
Yeah, I mean, that also said, like, just in the business side, to expand a little bit more, like, the film financing, I think, is very interesting. The way that a film comes together, where people work on contract and then have some of the back end of the film, the fact that they charge for their content all the time at every point is great. Like, that is, I was trying to think to myself, when's the last time I bought a song? Well, I just go, like, you know, I go on Spotify and I type up whatever I want, it comes up for free. And so I'm always, like, encouraging game developers, like, don't go too quick to a bundle to give it away, like, for, you know, pennies on the dollar. Hope these subscription services don't catch on, is what I'm hoping. Like, charge a premium, charge for that content.
Thank you for a very good answer.
You're welcome. All right.
Is that it for time and questions?
Yep. That's it for time.
Cool.
Thank you so much,
Thank
all
you.
of you, and thank you for all the questions. Yeah.
I'm not clapping for myself, I'm clapping for you guys.